Thank you for, yeah, there we go. Thank you for joining this meetup. Thank you for having me here. Here's what's in store. First of all, I'll do a little intro, the real intro. I will also mention numerous disclaimers and caveats. Nothing is straightforward anymore, and so you got to read the fine print, and I'll just try to highlight that for you. I want to talk a little bit about tech debt background, just make sure that we have a little level set and that we are on the same plane, at least when we talk about recognizing trouble, recognizing a couple of the sources of trouble, and then recognizing what progress looks like and what improvement, a path toward improvement might look like. Lastly, I will wrap up with a little bit of soapboxing about the real casualty and the real sort of damage that comes from this type of problem. And I will ask a couple questions of you, since you're here, since you are smart and experienced. I want to tap into some of those smarts a little bit and maybe help me with my next piece of writing. So let's dive into it. Ready for this?
Okay. I've seen that be an issue.
Boom. Thank you. First of all, thank you for lending me your ear and having a little bit of time here to talk about this stuff. A little bit about me first. I'm gentleman of a certain age, as I mentioned earlier, and my career started in the early 90s, let's say, right about the time that the web was exploding. And at least for businesses, it became the hot new thing. All of the energy that's going into AI, it seems so familiar because this is exactly the buzz that was happening in tech world, at least where tech and business collided. I worked for Thomson Publishing and helped them with publishing textbooks, writing a couple bits and pieces of textbooks. And then from there, I came to the Bay Area where I got connected with Kodak, and I see at least one my former colleagues in Kodak land. Hey, and from there, bounced out and worked in a bunch of startups, and then landed in consulting with LabZero. And through all of those experiences, my focus has been really on teams, developing software products. The practices involved with effective teamwork leading to high value product development is what turns me on about this whole business. My team at LabZero has done some pretty amazing things. We've seen a lot of really interesting stuff. We helped Ancestry.com have a successful IPO through the development and delivery of new software product on their behalf. We helped Visa acquire the largest payment platform and formulate an offering to the market and basically help them enter the market with their Visa payment platform. Photo transitioning to Kodak Gallery was pretty wild in retrospect. Dennis mentions in the chat there. 100% agree. And in my last interaction with James Joaquin, he called out how amazing that whole transition was. And if there's numbers to back that up, it's not just a feeling. LabZero, back to LabZero crew, they helped Autodesk preserve customers when Autodesk acquired a product and needed to basically fold that product into their platform. There are many other products or many other projects I can cite where we played the role of ghostwriters for household names like Google and Apple that where they needed people with skills and experience to carry their vision forward. My personal interest in this topic and is one that keeps my flames of passion burning bright, is the belief that
I'm going to show you how it doesn't work.
The tech world
It's not going to work.
needs to do better. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world which have been amplified, let's call it problematic amplification through some of the way technology has been foisted on us. I think if anyone had the experience of trying to help their parents schedule an appointment with a doctor using an online medical system, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. There are these features which have been brought into our life to make our life better and easier, which have failed to do so. And one of the dimensions of failure is this topic that I want to talk about today with this technical debt. I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going here. And I also believe that I will probably wrap things up slightly earlier than what Elena laid out there, but we're just going to go. We're going to see what happens here. Okay, you ready for some caveats and disclaimers? I say the usual one, but I haven't really delivered this speech too many times, and so I may need to amend this afterwards, depending on your feedback. But hey, I've taken liberties. This is my show. Some of my liberties have been conscious choices. Others, who knows, mistakes or instinct. At times, I will be reductive, overly simplistic, and maybe even vague. Just deal with it. I'm saying technical debt over and over and over in this thing, but I also mean design debt. Designers deal with highly complex artifacts, and they have to manage the sort of flow of information into and out of these artifacts at the same level of complexity as an engineer or product manager. And they are really part of the show. And if I say technical debt, I am not doing so in an exclusive way. I'm doing so because it's what the term we all know. But it really does include the designers world. I'm really interested in some of the recent dialogue about ethical debt. Check out that casey.prof domain if that's something that is you're slightly curious about. There's a lot of really interesting content that person has put together online. A lot of kind of TikTok format videos dealing with ethical challenges related to AI. Worth checking it out. A couple other caveats to mention. This is well-trodden territory. This is something that we all know a lot about. I'm not going to say a whole lot that's new. And I want to really hear from you maybe at the end of whether there's something new in the story here. I am going to try to look at this from a maybe slightly different angle, but it's really, I'm going to lean heavily on material that other people have written and expanded upon. And you'll see, in fact, we'll go right to Ward Cunningham at the beginning of the technical debt part of the conversation, because you have to go to the source there. And there'll be a couple other real obvious references. Another caveat, I'm not going to tell you how to solve your technical debt problems. That's not what this is about. This is about recognizing some of the patterns that would be part of a solution. Everybody's situation is unique. Everybody's challenges are unique. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. That is not what I would expect anyone to come away with from a brief conversation in a meetup like this tonight. But if you want help with that, give me a ring, because I would love to help you with that. Oh, another thing for all of you AI lovers floating around out there, no AI was used in writing any of this. I tried, believe me, I tried to prompt that thing to just say, give me the meetup script. It failed. I was not happy with it. These are my words. The images on the slides are not mine. I pulled those all off of Flickr. They're all Creative Commons licenses, and in the presentation that we'll share later, I cite all of the sources of those things. Is there anything more on the slide? Nah, we'll keep going because there are a couple more. Oh, no, a couple more caveats. This is the fine print. I might say a couple things along the way that ruffle some feathers, right? I like people. I'm so happy to see people on this call. Thank you for having your camera on there, Christina. That's really cool. And of course, Elena too. I appreciate seeing your faces there. But I am going to hold some people responsible for their role in creating problems related to technical debt. That might sound a little bit like blame, but I don't mean that to be blame. I will also blame some people for contributing to these problems, and where blame is due. And we'll roll with that. I would love to rant all night long about this, but I've cut plenty out of the picture for brevity purposes. we'll see whether or not there's actually any brevity involved with this thing. And I would say, just let me dig my hole. Like if I'm saying things that you think are factually wrong, let me dig my hole. And then you can either throw some dirt in there and just like forget about it, or call me out afterwards, and we'll address the divot in the truth there. Two quick biases are my final caveats. First of all, I'm a software guy. Bay ALN has plenty of people involved who are not focused on software. They are into the world of agility or coaching or something like that. And I am going to say that I look through all of the lens of software development, software teamwork, software product development with all of this topic. And it will be obvious. And if there's another way of looking at it that you think would help me, hit me up. I would love to hear about it. Bias number two, I'm a show me person. I want this to leave you with clear understanding of what to look for, what you would see with your eyes or with your searching in the calendar of the org that you're working with, or looking around and seeing what people are talking about, listening to what is happening with the teams. The evidence matters because the evidence is what will bring you closer to something real. All right, let's proceed a little bit here. Background. I'm not lazy, but I do need to put another talking head onto the screen for a minute here. Does anyone recognize this person here? This is Ward Cunningham. Ward Cunningham is one of the Agile Manifestoists. Ward Cunningham is an XP software programmer who has written a lot about teamwork, agility through the context of software engineering. Ward Cunningham is an important person in this topic because he came up with this whole term and this whole metaphor. And I have about 2 minutes of Ward talking that we should listen to, because he lays out what he meant when he brought up this term, technical debt. And this is part of my effort to build foundation that we can all stand on and all proceed from there. Ready? I'm going to hit the go button, and I think you'll hear his voice.
I became interested in the way metaphors influence how we think after reading George Lakoff and Mark Johnson's Metaphors We Live By. An important idea is that we reason by analogy with the metaphors that have entered our language. I coined the debt metaphor to explain the refactoring that we were doing on the YCash product. This was an early product done in Digitalk Smalltalk, and it was important to me that we accumulate the learnings we did about the application over time by modifying the program to look as if it had been as if we had known what we were doing all along, and to look as if it had been easy to do in Smalltalk. The explanation I gave to my boss, and this was financial software, was a financial analogy I called the debt metaphor. And that said that if we failed to make our program align with what we then understood to be the proper way to think about our financial objects, then we were going to continually stumble over that disagreement, and that would slow us down, which is like paying interest on a loan. With borrowed money, you can do something sooner than you might otherwise, but then until you pay back that money, you'll be paying interest. I thought borrowing money was a good idea. I thought that rushing software out the door to get some experience with it was a good idea, but that of course you would eventually go back, and as you learn things about that software, you would repay that loan by refactoring the program to reflect your experience as you acquire it.
Yeah, there it is right there. It's a metaphor. By the way, he cites this book, this Lakoff and book is like, it's profoundly good. Highly recommend it, especially if you deal with people. People love metaphors and might even like only relate to the world through metaphors. When you sort of boil it down to how the mental apparatus tends to work, worth reading. But the basic story is you make a decision and there's a trade-off. You get an advantage and then you got to pay back that advantage with some interest. And I love how the he talks about we're going to stumble over ourselves until we have a clear understanding of these objects. And he's, referring to it, software engineers building software in a way that is imperfect representation of the thing that they're trying to give to their customer. I also want to give a little shout out to Ward for really embracing the whole get software out the door quickly. Like that is part of the whole value prop of agility. And I think there's a bunch of really interesting angles that he brings to the table with that, which is like you have to know a lot. You build to your best understanding. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And I want to ask a question of you about basically developing that best understanding. I'm going to, let's say here, am I here? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, before we do a quick a little example of this thing, I want to just admit that I have a hunch about you and about your experience, because I think you're probably already experts in this topic. I think basically anyone who's worked in software has dealt with these types of trade-offs. And it is really the nature of the game. There's so much of the time and energy spent on these like trade-offs, but for how things can happen. We've all taken that quick and dirty road and then had to deal with cleanup afterwards. And in some ways, that's part of what we're talking about here. And let's be reductive and simple with this and just say every planning meeting, every strategy session, every pull request contends with aspects of a trade-off. There's we could do it the hard way, the right way. We do it the quick way. The iron triangle comes to mind with this sort of trade-off situation that we find ourselves in so much of the day. In fact, like I would say, it's so normal that there are plenty of companies that don't even have this problem. Like, it's not a problem. This is just how work happens. When I brought this topic of technical debt to my team and said I want to write a blog post about it, my team was like, who cares? That's just called software development. What you're describing is so normal, Chris. And I do want to get to where this becomes problematic fairly quickly. We'll get there. Let's start this with an example. Okay. The typical example, inflexible framework. You know what a framework is? It's just part of the application. And why? Well, because management says short deadline to reach market quickly, be first movers. It's going to be worth it. We can get our thing out the door quickly. Have you heard this before? Developer chooses a framework that is fast to build on, but has known flexibility issues. It doesn't do everything. It'll do this thing, and we're going to be great there. But as soon as we have to do something different, it's going to be a little bit of work involved with that. That's where the work gets a little bit more complex. Okay, the payback. Now, this is the payback would be fixing and refactoring the app to a more flexible framework at some point down the road. At some point. We'll talk about that point a little bit too. Does all this make sense to you? Is this clear? That sort of trade-off, the shortcut, and the payback. There's another angle of this which I want to call out, which is that interest, which is if you live with that framework for a long period of time, it means simple things will be harder than they should be. And simple things will take a little longer and will be a little more expensive. And simple things may take a little longer to fix. And there's going to be simple things which aren't addressed because of the inflexibility of that framework. And I think that angle of the interest payment payoff isn't terribly well agreed upon by the people who need to know. So there is this tipping point when things go bad. So those trade-offs consciously made, great. We love that. We want lots of conscious trade-offs. That's called software development. It's just normal. But sometimes, every once in a while, there are unconscious choices being made as well. Not planned, not part of the plan, not part of our experience or our understanding. People have limits. People are operating at the limits of their experience. They're operating within the limits of a budget. Our attention can be fragmented. We might not have the whole picture of the thing that we're trying to decide on. That technical spike that the engineer had to deal with in order to pick the framework. Did they have the right information? Did the product manager know which direction it was going to go? Who knows? Probably not. Company context matters too. I would say this is a really big one. Like companies who have not really sorted out their product market fit in startup land, does it even matter? Well, is there a corner to paint yourself in? No. Oftentimes, it doesn't really matter. You can basically live and deal with the stuff with impunity. But I would say that for those places where it does matter, where you have customers, you got product market fit, and you're just trying to basically, solve something that the business has decided is important. This is where technical debt can kind of put an invisible finger on the scale and tip it towards something bad. We're entering the problem space here. How would you recognize trouble? What might you see as you peer into your goggles on Santorini or wherever the heck this is? Well, maybe you've seen this sort of thing. Is your team in the danger zone? You might find yourself facing quality challenges, unable to deliver new features. There's something that is slowing things down. Maybe you're on a team where you have a sprint demo every couple, whatever, let's go, every increment. And you're looking at these demos and you're like, is that it? Is that all we're doing? Underwhelming sprint demos is a great place to look at how your team is spinning its wheels during the sprint. People feeling like they're stuck in firefighting mode or bogged down. When you look at that roadmap and it's stalled, oh, how many people here are dealing with their Q4 planning right now, halfway through October? Several of our clients are. They may be dealing with some challenges related to technical debt. Let's go a little further. We're all metric driven. We care about the graphs. We look at numbers. Your teams are probably measuring the impact of this. Bugs rolling from sprint to sprint, stories getting rejected, stories being added to sprint, mid-sprint, poor test coverage. There's a number you should be able to find in every software project that's going on for the test coverage. It's probably not so great. Low velocity, maybe low morale. Like if you spend time with people and you're in, checking in on how everybody's doing, you're going to keep track of this stuff. And you're going to pay close attention to it. Your business might be measuring things at a slightly different level. The impact of this stuff, low customer sat metrics, low revenue, high customer churn, all of this stuff that deals with signals that a company is serving its customers well, might not be pointing in the right direction. Make sense so far? I want to keep going. Let's talk about where this is coming from. There are many ways that this can show up here. I'm really only going to talk about two of the most common sources, and let's just start right there. Boom. Software engineers. Am I blaming? TBD on that. We'll come back to it. Your software engineers are creating technical debt. If your engineers lack experience and skills to manage complexity and refactor effectively and to advocate for the refactoring and the re-architecting and the automation, they will build more than you need and they will have a hard time maintaining it. It's that tipping point thing. Maybe there are situations where spraying code all over everything is totally fine, but there are plenty of situations where it's not. And the engineers who don't have the discipline to regularly review, refactor, test, and remove the junk are going to be part of the contribution technical debt that you're facing. Here's what you might not see. You might not see standards. You might not see anybody reviewing code or no process for reviewing code. There might not be test automation or poor coverage or something like that. You might not have regular refactoring of your application. There might not be people thinking about re-architecting. There's no dialogue about that. There's no meeting about that. There's no group that's tasked with the job of making sure that the software application is tuned to the needs of the business or the customers. There's no one spending time evaluating new tech or libraries. There's no, like, the thing that is so amazing about this this world that we're working in here in the software development is it's advancing rapidly. I already claimed that there was no AI involved with this thing, and I stand by that claim, but like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in that whole department. The tool set is changing, the landscape is changing, and that should be someone's job basically to keep track of that stuff and make sure that there are advantages out there in the world that are being considered for the product or the application of the platform that you're owning. Oh, how about this one? Product managers and engineers not really working together to understand what's needed. Sort of throw over the fence thing. It can be very, let's say, low productive relationship at best and toxic and weird at worst. But I think one killer here and one sign of lack of expertise and lack of experience is an engineer not advocating for process. Someone who's totally fine with just like winging it and going for it is really never going to be able to establish the practice that is necessary for avoiding some of the pitfalls here that we talked about earlier, some of the signs, larger systemic signs of problems resulting from technical debt. Have I become enemies of engineers so far? No, not yet. Give it time though. Let that sink in for a minute. Let's move on to the second source. Oh, it's your product managers. They're creating technical debt. Because if their product managers aren't effective with stakeholder management, they engage in deadline-driven prioritization, they have poor collaboration with technical roles. Oh my gosh. They have no idea what the customers really need, and they have no idea what the business really needs. This will conspire to let your teams write code that doesn't serve the business, has no relevance, and you're going to have to wade through all of that stuff. And Ward Cunningham, his terms is bonk into it, trip all over it while you try to get simple things done. Or more complex things, or just, let's say, more valuable things. And let's take a little gander through some of the things you might not see when you look at your product managers. Do you see them saying yes to their CEO's harebrained idea? As CEO, I love to have harebrained ideas. I feel it is my, my God-given right to come to my team with a harebrained idea. And if they say yes to it, I usually stop them and say, hey, are you sure? Because don't say yes to my harebrained idea. Setting strings of date-driven milestones. We gotta do this by that, and we do, and there's no flexibility. You've been there, you've seen it, seen how that like creates problems. Not clear on what customers really need. Are we solving a problem? Are we giving the customer? Is this more important to the customer or to us? Being clear about the difference between the affinity and desirability of any piece of work that's being considered, whether it matters to the business or customers. Not clear on customer or business priorities. There are plenty of companies that have really clear vision, but really hard to translate that vision to priorities, and not a whole lot of agreement from team to team or section, wing to wing of the company apparatus. Not working to solve a measurable problem or solution, putting it out there because it seems right or feels right, or it's like catching up with a competitor, if they're doing it, we got to do it too. Boom. And like, do we really need to do that? Are we going to live with this for the long haul? Are we going to be able to get rid of it when we show that no one really cares about this feature that we're putting out there? When the engineers finally show up and say, hey, we need to refactor, we need to architect this, and the product manager has to toe the line and say, no, we don't have the time for this. We have to do these things by these dates. There's going to be this sort of battle of wills that will emerge in this situation here. Saying yes to big bang change, we're gonna boil the ocean. I think that's another one where you're gonna end up in all the problems that we talked about earlier. Does this make sense? Of course you're wondering, Chris, why are you gonna blame these poor engineers and product managers? Some of my best friends are product managers and engineers, and like, I don't really like the culture of blame, and I don't really want to go there too much. People are limited. Didn't I already say that? Why the beat down? I don't really want to deliver a beat down here, and that's not my point. The point is really to be honest and clear about what's happening and the source, because you got to admit that there is an experience gap in a lot of situations, and because any effort to change that situation needs to happen somewhere. It's got to be people changing. It's got to be people's behavior changing. Where will you see that? Who will you look for in order to observe some sort of change or improvement? Dennis says PMs and SEs need to be joined at the hip, and it's not taught in school. And I agree 100%. The sort of tight bond between a senior engineer and a product manager is not something that comes, directly off the shelf. That is something that is formed through experience, and I think the really good ones will have that affinity for each other. And I appreciate you calling that out in the chat there. Showing where change needs to take place, and we should be able to see if you're in a situation where you're trying to change this in a different direction and transform for the better. Here's where you might see it. I'll get to that in a second, but first I got a little soapbox moment here. Like product development, software product development, it's not rocket science. There's a lot of stuff that's been written about it. It's pretty straightforward. At least that's what I thought. Actually, I think it's harder than rocket science, because at least with rockets, you're dealing with physics, and that's predictable. And I think with software development, it's hard because there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of dynamics that you can't predict. It's people, it's businesses, it's customers, it's perception. It's like this very squishy area that at its heart has, some hard engineering, some hard technology that needs to show up and deliver some part of the value, of the point, of the purpose for existing in the first place. As it turns out, getting people to work together is extremely challenging. If you're not pouring beer all the time or whatever, Kool-Aid, having the right snacks, it's so much more than that. But keeping people organized and working together takes a lot of work, takes a lot of energy. And different groups have different needs. And there is no one size fits all solution to dealing with people. Managing the forces at work, very challenging. It's not gravity. It's not friction. It's leadership. It's culture. It's bureaucracy. These things have no bounds and no limits, and is like can seep into a situation, a picture, in so many different ways. It's very challenging. The people who are successful at this are, more adept at dealing with complexity than rocket scientists. This is hard stuff. So, progress. I was just saying, what does it look like? What are we dealing with here? Could flip all those other slides upside down, basically. Responsible software engineers, you're going to be able to observe these things. There are published standards. Someone has written a wiki page somewhere, or in Git, there's like a place where you can go to find the standards that are written, and whether it's a testing standard or a coding standard or a, how to write a story or how to deal with a pull request or something like that, there'll be an example that people can cite and refer to. And when there's a problem, when there's some sort of systematic problem, they'll go back to the standard and they'll update the standard in order to change the whole team operate in a slightly different way. There's a lot of reviewing of code. Nothing is going into the repo without a pull request being reviewed. And there's a lot of focus on how long has this pull request been sitting. We want to respond to that. The sort of turnaround time for PR, very short, because there are people who know and prioritize the job of reviewing code. Good test automation coverage. Engineers writing tests. Oh, shocking. People are responsible for quality. The people who build the features should be thinking about tests and building that sort of safety net coverage. The tests allow a product to change radically when you have your test coverage. People say, well, it's too expensive, too much time. Well, that's the cost of software development. We'll get into that in a moment when we advance toward the end of the deck here. Regular refactoring. How much time is spent refactoring? How many story points? You don't give story points to refactoring. It's kind of a chore. Should be ongoing. And I think it is one of these things that people lose track of. They think that they have a team of 10 engineers or 5 engineers at their beck and call to spray new features all over everything. But no, false. Some of those people are spending their time refactoring what has already been delivered. They've learned something. They need to. I think about words in the beginning where we learn something and then we refactor it because we've delivered quickly and now we see what really needs to happen and we refine our understanding has refined. We need to refine the application accordingly. Ongoing evaluation of new tech libraries. Somebody's spending time on it. There's people have a brown bag. They want to come back and show something. There's a process for this, or there is at least a culture of curiosity and exploration going on related to the tooling. Good collab between product managers to build understanding. That is such an important thing. That comment that Dennis made in the chat. It isn't something that is taught at school. It's something that requires having done this a little bit. And the benefit that comes from that is that rapport leads to clarity on where to put the energy, where to put the focus, and what is safe to do as the quick and dirty type of work, and how to keep track of that stuff and how to pay it down, because we know that we don't want to be stuck in that debt situation. Always advocating for appropriate process. There are people who love process and love to spray process all over everything. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the right level of There's a fine-tune effort there where there's a trade-off. You make these decisions based on a trade-off with regard to process as well. And there's probably somebody's blog post that we can refer to about the process debt that emerges from bad choices there. One thing I want to call out here is that first bullet, publish standards. We put a bunch of standards online a little while back. And we did this for self-serving reasons because we worked with a lot of clients whose teams didn't have standards. And we just needed to basically put something on a server somewhere. We can say, hey, it says here that a pull request looks like X. And as it turns out, our clients ended up adopting these standards, a lot of those things. And I want to just have a quick pointer to that thing, because if you are working with teams that need to start publishing their standards, this might help kickstart a little bit of that sort of thing. And maybe I can type that into the chat and just let you have it there too. Click on something. Okay. Responsible software engineers, love them. I like the irresponsible ones too, but don't tell them I said that. Hey, your product managers, they are managing technical debt when they're saying no to your CEO's harebrained idea. Maybe yes to some of the good ones, but they know why it's good and they can relate it to the context of where the business is today and rationalize it. setting strings of, let's say, maturity-driven milestones, and maybe there's a better term to put there. I'm not attached to maturity, but something that's not like a string of hard dates that need to be met, that are clearly going to push the technical debt situation into the red zone. You know, good product managers have many ways to hear what customers really need, and it's not just through, you know, the official channels. They have their own back channels too, and they basically prioritize making sure that that signal is coming through loud and clear. And it doesn't necessarily mean giving the customer what they want. It means knowing where the gaps are with the product, knowing what customers are expecting and how customers perceive value from a product, and building a high fidelity understanding of what matters to customers is what your responsible product managers will deal with. They will reject situations that arise where they are unable to do so. Saying yes when your engineers advocate for time to refactor, re-architect, I think knowing when that needs to happen and being realistic about the ownership, the job of ownership with software is something that responsible product managers will deal with. And managing upward as well, helping the leadership and the org understand that responsible ownership means doing certain things like refactoring, re-architecting, and constant upkeep of this, the most valuable thing that you've worked on and created. Saying no to big bang change. Yeah, I mean, everybody loves a big bang. It can be very exciting. People make their careers off that sort of thing, but there's very rarely where it absolutely needs to happen. And I think this is one of these situations where, at least looking through the lens of managing technical debt, there are other approaches to big change that start small. There, you might even see some things that are new, that didn't exist before. It's not just like meetings dealing with talking about new tools or something. It's not just brown bag, but you might actually see things like an inventory of technical debt. One of the ways to deal with this is to put a name on it, to measure it, to keep track of it, and say, okay, these are our conscious choices. These are the categories in which these choices fall, at least within our application. Maybe there's some high complexity choices that you need to think about and revisit. Maybe there's some easier ones, and those can be easily prioritized and pulled into the BAU and the work that is in flight already. Thinking about the impact to the business as well for some of those choices. What is really going to make a difference to the business or customers? Talking about that and having visibility into that. Publishing a list of the tracked debts and these things where we know we have to go back and fix it. Like, that is an artifact. You might see it if your team is collaborating and working closely on solving these problems. So you got to celebrate some of those changes too. Product managers, designers, and engineers flexing their practice to learn and adapt. Like, the learning matters in a big way. And I think that's one of the things I really appreciated from listening to more of that video from Ward Cunningham. Is like, he is prioritizing learning as a first-class job of engineers and everybody on the software team. Like, you got to learn. You got to learn how effective your work has been. You're building quickly, pushing out quickly, and then learning about how the users and the business interact through what you have created there. And I'm hopeful that the people who are living by the values and the standards that we're talking about here on these slightly lavender purpley slides are showing that they've raised awareness about how software development craft supports the business. Like, the things people do drive the business, and so being good at those things that people are doing seems important, and seems like it needs to be tuned to both the business and customers. Eventually, my hope is that the business should recognize the value that comes from the craftsmanship and the decisions that people make on all of this. Do you believe that? I do. I've seen it. But there is a real victim here that we need to talk about. And that's, I picked the picture because it's slightly Halloween, you know, it's a little Halloweeny. I hope that you are, you know, thinking about Halloween a little bit. Here we are in October. There is a victim. The victim, in my opinion, this is soapbox. I mean, this is all my opinion. So this is my show. The victim here is really, it's the understanding of value. This is the worst part. Value gets lost in the shuffle. You know, hey, example. How much sales tax did you pay last time you went to the store? How much did you pay last year? Do you know? Do you keep track of that? How aware of that cost are you? It's kind of like a hidden cost. It's just there. Yeah, you look at the receipt, it's going to be laid out there, but I doubt that you're like looking at the whole picture. That hidden cost, you know, comes at a percentage, 5.5% in Berkeley or something like that. Call me out if I'm wrong on that. Hey, but what if that percentage creeps up slowly? What if it's like 50%? What if it's 150%? What if that percentage was like ridiculously high? Like, how would you notice that if it was this sort of slow change? When would it become a burden? Like, what is the point where you would say, no, problem? I'm not trying to be anti-tax. I'm not advocating for overthrowing the government. That's not the point here. The point is about yes, when the frog dies, when the boiling point happens. Sure, I mean that's the impact, Roy. I appreciate that. You know, I'm thinking about like that cost that people live with, where it's like everything is slower, simple things are harder, and you get used to that. You don't have to get used to that. You just need to spend a little time, you know, doing a little bit of this responsible work, refactoring, thinking about your customers, and there's an even worse angle here, which is like you get so used to the shortcuts. Imagine you're not paying any of these debts. You guys, you talked about the startup operating with impunity because there's no corner to paint yourself into earlier. What if you get so used to those shortcuts that like any sort of real cost of software just gets lost in the shuffle? You get so used to it. Well, this is the part that gets me like really like activated. I think that really profound problems arise when expectations are out of whack. You're out of whack because you've ignored this whole debt payment thing. You hide the true cost of design and development. You'll hear things be like people saying, "Why is this so expensive? Why does it take so long? So easy. Why don't you just..." Well, sometimes you're used to things being so easy, and you haven't really dealt with the work that needs to happen to keep the house in order. I think it's hard enough to design and build products that serve people and are valuable to a business. And, you know, a lot of teams that I have seen over the years find themselves doing this with kind of, they've got blinders on. Their hands are tied behind their back. They do not have the full picture. There's a better metaphor that could probably show up there. Smarter people than me that can suggest them. Maybe when the frog dies. That's a good metaphor too. But if you can't make a trade-off or prioritize without understanding cost or value, like, can you even build a product in this situation? Are we hiding the cost of our failures? This is the part that's really like has an impact to people, I think, because the software that people rely on to do things like have a meetup or pay your bills or redo your vehicle registration or something like that. Some basic stuff that people need to kind of like get their job, get their kids enrolled in school or something like that. Oh my gosh. Such garbage that we have to wade through to get some basic things done is through all these shortcuts, I believe, that has this impact on us. I think we all deserve better. The people who use the stuff, the end users, deserve better. At the heart of the matter with this, it's effective engineering and product practices can deliver better. And I think the world needs us to do better. And That's the bulk of the talk right there. This is where you're supposed to say, yeah, Chris, all right, there we go. I got a couple questions for you. I'm not totally done. I got 2 more things I want to go through. And I'm going to ask you to, thank you, Des. I'm going to ask you to maybe type in the meeting chat. If you want to unmute yourself and yell something at me, I'm all game for that too. But I got question number 1 here. How do you manage learning? Like, learning seems really important. Can I put like about 1 more minute of Ward on the talking head? It's not that I'm lazy. It's just that he's a smart guy, and he made a couple of really good points here. And I was just going to put him back on for a minute because he goes on from what we played earlier.
A lot of bloggers, at least, have explained the debt metaphor and confused it, I think, with the idea that you could write code poorly with the intention of doing a good job later, and thinking that that was the primary source of debt. I'm never in a favor of writing code poorly, but I am in favor of writing code to reflect your current understanding of a problem, even if that understanding is partial. You know, if you want to be able to go into debt that way by developing software that you don't completely understand, you're wise to make that software reflect your understanding as best you can, so that when it does come time to refactor, it's clear what you were thinking when you wrote it, and making it easier to refactor it into what your current thinking is now. In other words, the whole debt metaphor, or let's say the ability to pay back debt and make the debt metaphor work for your advantage, depends upon you writing code that is clean enough to be able to refactor as you come to understand your problem.
Clean enough to be able to refactor. That's like such a XP guy's point of view. They definitely extreme programming is coursing through his veins there. Clean code, you really want that, and that means clarity. It means ability to be understood by the whole team, and ability to understand quickly where to make the change as you go on. So the question I have for you is, and fire up your fingers here, type it into that little chat. Like, the call to action that I think Ward is laying out for me is learning is important. Always be learning. Our understanding lags reality. The real situation is just beyond us. And our agile team, using the finest XP practices to design and build the most valuable software, we push that out there, and then we learn. And then we learn something. Our learning is just behind what is really going on there. How do we become effective and always productive as we expand our understanding? How do we manage learning? Learning is a job, the part of the job. If you're not learning, something's off, something's wrong here. What is a good way to encourage, or let's say ensure, if it's that important, that this type of learning is happening in the teams that you are working with? I'm really curious. And maybe if you don't want to do it right now, you can type a couple things in there, and I'll come back to it. Time to experiment. I love it. And that means like thinking about a hypothesis, laying it out there, having a safe way of doing it, and having the time to basically be doing that type of learning. And that is basically a way of prioritizing the output is the learning. And getting feedback from customers. Tammy mentions that one. I love that one. Yes, especially if there's a customer council that can kind of like speak up and talk about more of the world that the customers live in, and there are a group of people that can share that with the broader team. It's really good. Dennis's question is about spike stories with that time to experiment. Yeah, I think the spike story is, or chore, or depending on your flavor of agility, how you deal with that, folding that into the mix and being able to see that those things are in there, and having the team kind of value the time that's spent on those things. I think that's a really good one too. These are all good. If you got more, type them in there. I would love to hear more about your thoughts or follow up afterwards. My question number 2 is, who do you know? Who in your world needs help with this topic? Who's suffering from the low quality, low NPS customer sat metrics? This is one of the most written about topics, and it's, if you do a little Google Zeitgeist search, you're going to find lots written on it. Yet it is so common. It is so commonplace. It is something that everybody is facing in some way, shape, or form, or at least it's so frequent. Are you working with anyone who's struggling from the impact of this thing? Would you consider making an intro to me? I'd just love to talk with them. I'd love to hear about what they're dealing with. And it's, I work for a services company, and we definitely could help in that world. But I think my first instinct is really to learn more about what they're dealing with, because I want to be able to speak in a way that shows up as help for those people who need it the most. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of that. I see Roy put a note in there about mentorship. Pairing newbies with experienced people causes growth on both. I love that one. Mentorship and the sort of pairing, the learn once, do once, teach once pattern, as being part of a cultural, an organized way of operating, just a normal way a team operates. That is so important. I really love that one. I've seen it work. Yeah, having the executive support, also a really important one, Elena. Love that. Love all these things. Thank you so much for these thoughts. And spray more in. My email's here. You can reach me there. My team has been dealing with a lot of these things that touch on technical debt issues, and that's one of the reasons why I follow that New Yorker cartoon where it says "write about dogs," and there's a whole bunch of dogs running by the person in the cartoon. I should have that on my slide here, but I don't. But in many ways, technical debt is the dogs that I'm writing about here, because we run across this with the work that LabZero does in our fractional or interim leadership engagements, where we try to bring deep experience to our clients. And a lot of times, my engineers are dealing with application modernization challenges. It's basically helping people get a little more mileage from their technical investment. And sometimes it's addressing some of those technical debt issues and putting a lot of energy into a little effort to focus re-architectural or architectural changes that bring more value and a little bit more stability to the our clients' world. This design ops engagement is really about getting the right level of customer signal into a team so that there is a little bit more clarity with the customer needs, customer wishes. And of course, that strategic product development, that's that ghostwriting thing that I was talking about in the first slide there in my intro.